I want to start by saying that I'm not someone who tells stories like this. I'm not the kind of person who sits around campfires or posts things on forums or builds a reputation on being interesting. I've spent most of my adult life trying not to be noticed, trying to stay employed, trying not to give anyone a reason to look at me too long. That's not modesty, it's just accurate. So when I say that what happened at the Dellwood Community Recreation Center changed something in me, I need you to understand that I'm not saying it for effect. I'm not saying it because I want you to think I'm haunted or dramatic or special. I'm saying it because it's the only honest way I know to begin. This was about 4 years ago now, maybe 4.5. I was 31, recently divorced in the practical sense, meaning the paperwork hadn't been filed yet, but the marriage was over in every way that counted. I'd been laid off from a logistics coordinator position at a regional freight company after they reorganized their middle management, which was a polite way of saying they found someone younger who'd do the same job for $12,000 less per year. I had a 1-bedroom apartment in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, a car with a transmission that was starting to complain, and a checking account that had already started making decisions for me about what I could and couldn't afford. The overnight janitorial position at Dellwood paid $14.50 an hour, which wasn't going to fix anything long term, but it was going to buy me time. That's how I thought about it. Buy time, stabilize, figure out the next step. I wasn't ashamed of needing it exactly, but I wasn't proud of it either. I had a degree. I'd managed a team of 11 people. I'd had a 401k with actual money in it before the divorce started bleeding things out. And now I was filling out a paper application at a folding table in a municipal rec center lobby because their online portal wasn't working. And the woman at the front desk had handed me a pen that said Dellwood Parks and REC on the side in faded blue letters, like a pen from another decade. The building was built in the late 70s. You could tell just from looking at it. One of those low, flat-roofed civic structures that was probably considered modern when they broke ground. All poured concrete and dark brick and narrow windows set too high in the walls. The kind of building that was designed to be functional and ended up just being grim. There were 2 gymnasiums, a pool, a weight room, a handful of offices and meeting rooms, a concessions area, and a little community room that got rented out for birthday parties and AA meetings and grief support groups, sometimes on the same day. The lobby smelled like chlorine and carpet and something else underneath those things that I couldn't identify then. I would identify it later. It's a smell that's hard to describe. It's close to the smell of old paper, like files that have been in a drawer for years, or like the inside of a coat that used to belong to someone who doesn't wear it anymore. I got a call 2 days after I turned in the application. They needed someone to start the following Monday. The pay was $14.50. The shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., Monday through Friday. There was a part-time benefits package available after 90 days, which meant partial dental and not much else. I said yes before the HR coordinator finished explaining the dental. I showed up that Monday at 9:50 because I've always been early. Old habit. The front desk was being closed down for the night by a woman named Patricia, who was maybe 60, efficient, and completely uninterested in conversation. She pointed me toward the maintenance hallway without looking up from her drawer counting. And that's where I met Gerald. Gerald Haas was 63 years old. I found out later, not because he told me, but because I saw his timesheet once when I was logging my own hours and couldn't help noticing. He was a medium-built man, a little thick through the middle, the kind of build that looked permanent rather than sedentary. He had gray hair cut short and close, the kind of haircut you get at a Supercuts without really caring what it looks like. just needing it managed. His skin was pale in that way that comes from spending years working nights. He wore the standard issue, dark blue uniform pants and a gray zip-up sweatshirt over the uniform shirt because the building ran cold, especially in the corridors. He shook my hand when I introduced myself. Firm grip, quick release, not trying to prove anything. He looked at me for a moment, the way experienced people look at new people, gauging something efficiently. "Danny," he said. It wasn't a question, just confirming what he'd been told. "Yeah, Daniel Marsh." "Gerald." He handed me a uniform shirt still in plastic wrap. "Locker room's through there. Get changed, get your cart. I'll walk you through the routine." That was our introduction. No small talk, no welcome. I appreciated it, honestly. I was in no mood for someone performing friendliness. The training took about an hour and a half that first night. Gerald was methodical. He walked me through the building in order, the way he always did his own rounds. And he explained what needed to be cleaned and when and how, and what cleaning solutions went on, what surfaces and which floors needed the buffer, and which just needed the wet mop, and how to manage the pool area without leaving streaks on the tile. He wasn't warm about it, but he wasn't harsh either. He was just precise. The way someone is when they've explained something many times and found that being precise is more efficient than being friendly. He showed me the supply closet at the east end of the first floor, the one with the industrial shelving and the smell of pine cleaner that had soaked into the walls over decades. He showed me how to fill out the maintenance log. He showed me where the breaker panels were in case a fluorescent tube blew, which they did often in this building, he said. Old wiring. The building had been partially rewired in the 90s, but not completely, and you could feel it sometimes. A slight variation in the light, a subtle brown-out quality in certain hallways at certain times of night. He walked me past the administrative corridor on the second floor, showed me which offices got cleaned Tuesday and Thursday, only because those were the days staff left early and we were allowed access, showed me how to lock them back properly, which key went to which room, how to avoid the squeaky third stair on the east stairwell, because it had startled him once, years ago, and he preferred not to be startled. He walked me past the community room, past the storage closets, past the vending area with its 3 humming machines and their sick fluorescent glow, past the old bulletin board near the gymnasium entrance with its layer of paper notices, some current, some months old, a flyer for a 2019 yoga class still pinned beneath a notice about updated pool hours. And then we were in the west hallway near the old lobby access, and he stopped. The lost and found was in a room adjacent to the west lobby entrance. It wasn't a dramatic room. It wasn't sealed with a heavy door or marked with any special signage. It was a regular door, white painted wood. The paint chipped and scuffed at the base from years of being kicked open by people carrying things. The sign on the door was the kind you buy at an office supply store. White plastic with black letters, the typeset kind. And it said, "Lost and Found," in simple uppercase. Inside, when Gerald opened the door and reached in to hit the light switch without entering, there were metal shelving units along 3 walls, and on the shelves, things. The ordinary accumulated debris of a public building over years. Umbrellas, folded jackets, a pair of children's snow boots, a gym bag, some water bottles, a baseball cap, a library book, a phone charger, a single glove. Things that people left behind without noticing or noticed too late or decided weren't worth coming back for. There was a folding table along the far wall with a 3-ring binder on it, the log where items were recorded when they came in. Gerald showed me all of this from the doorway. He did not walk in. "This gets cleaned on Wednesdays," he said. "Quick sweep, wipe down the shelves, empty the wastebasket, nothing else. Don't move anything on the shelves. Don't go through the log, just clean and leave." "Got it," I said. He was quiet for a moment. He reached in and turned the light back off. The room went dark. "One other thing," he said. He said it in the same tone he'd used for everything else. The same flat, practical tone he'd been using for an hour and a half. There was nothing theatrical about it. That was what made me remember it. "After closing," he said, "don't look inside." I waited to see if there was more. There wasn't. "Okay," I said, "why not?" He pulled the door shut. The latch clicked. Because what's in there after closing isn't always what got turned in. He walked back to retrieve his cart from the hallway, and I stood there for a second processing that, and then I followed him. Because what else was I gonna do? He hadn't said it like a ghost story. He'd said it like a fire safety regulation. Keep the exit clear. Don't block the sprinkler heads. Don't look in the lost and found after closing. I filed it under workplace superstition and tried to move on. My first few solo shifts were uneventful in the way that only very empty buildings at 2 a.m. can be. Not peaceful exactly, but a particular kind of quiet that takes some getting used to. Dellwood was a big enough building that you could never hear all of it at once. There was always something at the edge of perception. The HVAC system had a way of cycling on and off that made it sound in certain hallways, like breathing. The pipes in the pool area knocked occasionally, a sound that traveled through the walls and arrived in the women's locker room as a soft, rhythmic knock that meant nothing but sounded like someone testing a door. The fluorescent lights in the west corridor had a particular flicker, not constant, not dramatic, just a brief dimming, a half-second brownout every few minutes. Like the building was thinking about something and losing focus. Gerald had mentioned it. Old wiring, I noted it and moved on. I worked the routine the way Gerald had laid it out. Start with the pool area while it was still damp from the evening swimmers. Get the worst of the water up and let the fans run. Move to the locker rooms, both of them, methodically. Then the gymnasium, which at 11 p.m. still smelled like sneaker rubber and adolescent exertion from the evening basketball leagues. Then the main hallway, then the lobby, then the vending area, then the upstairs, when I had access, then the community room. Then, on Wednesdays, the lost and found. The first Wednesday I cleaned the lost and found, I was careful to do it the way Gerald had said. Quick sweep. Wipe the shelves without moving what was on them. Empty the wastebasket. Leave. The room was ordinary. The things on the shelves were ordinary. Someone's North Face fleece that had been there long enough to have gathered a thin skin of dust on the shoulders. A kid's lunchbox, bright blue, with a cartoon dinosaur on it. The zipper open, empty. A hardcover library book bent cornered with a Columbus Metropolitan Library barcode sticker on the spine. I checked the title out of habit. It was a memoir by someone I'd never heard of. One of those books with a one-word title and a close-up of the author's face on the cover, looking off-camera in a way that was probably meant to suggest depth. I swept. I wiped. I took the wastebasket out, emptied it, brought it back. I left the room and pulled the door shut behind me. That was it. The warning made no sense, but also, nothing had happened. So I continued filing it under superstition and moved on. The thing about the overnight janitor job that nobody tells you is what it does to your sense of time. During the day, time has texture, things interrupt it. People, noise, light, changes, meals. But at night in an empty building, time becomes a single, long, uninterrupted stretch. And you move through it the way you move through water, with slight resistance. You're aware that it's passing, but you can't feel it passing in the normal way. 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. feel almost identical except for what your body is doing. And your body at 4 a.m. is making its displeasure known in new and specific ways. I was tired a lot. That's important to acknowledge, because tired people's perceptions shift. I know that. I'm not trying to discredit what I noticed by admitting I was tired, but I also want to be honest that I considered that possibility frequently in the early weeks. Tired people hear things. Tired people see movement in their peripheral vision. Tired people connect things that aren't connected. So when in my second week I heard a sound from the direction of the lost and found room at approximately 1:30 in the morning, I paused, listened, and decided it was the pipes. It was a soft sound, not a knocking or a bang, more like something settling. The way furniture settles in a house sometimes, a brief creak or compression. It came from the direction of the west hallway, which is where the lost and found was. I was in the vending area, maybe 40 feet away. I heard it, I stopped my mop, I waited, and then I went back to mopping, because it was probably the pipes. But I noticed it. Gerald and I overlapped for about 2 hours each night during his closing and my opening of the shift. He was usually finishing up the pool area when I arrived, because he did the pool last. We'd pass in the maintenance corridor. We'd check in about anything that needed flagging, a spill in the community room from a rental party, a toilet that needed a new handle in the men's room, a fluorescent tube out in the second floor hallway, that sort of thing. Professional logistics. He was not unfriendly, but he was not warm. And I'd begun to appreciate that about him. There was a kind of respect in it. One night, maybe 3 weeks in, I mentioned the sound. I tried to do it casually. I keep hearing something from the west hallway, I said, around the lost and found area. Probably the pipes, but I wanted to flag it. Gerald was refilling a cleaning solution bottle at the utility sink. He kept filling it. When? He said. Around 1:30. It's a soft sound, like something settling. He put the cap on the bottle, tightened it, set it on the cart. It's not the pipes in that part of the building, he said. The pipes run along the east wall? Oh, I said. He looked at me for a moment, the same assessing look he'd given me that first night. You didn't go in? He said. It wasn't a question. No, I said. Good. He picked up his cart. Log it as a maintenance note. Unexplained settling sounds, west hallway. Just write that. Use those words. Should I put anything else? No, he said, just those words. There's a section in the log for recurring notes. Use that section. And then he left, and I stood there by the utility sink, and the building hummed around me. I did some research on Dellwood that I'm a little embarrassed about in retrospect. The way you're embarrassed when you Google symptoms at midnight and convince yourself you have something rare. I looked it up at home during the day when I should have been sleeping. It was a standard municipal parks and recreation facility, built in 1978, renovated partially in 1994, partially again in 2007. Average budget, average services, nothing remarkable about its history. It had won a county recreation award in 2003. There had been a boiler issue in 2011 that closed the pool for 6 weeks. a parking lot resurfacing in 2016. There was nothing about disappearances or deaths or any of the things you'd find if this were a movie. No local legends that Google knew about, no news stories past the boiler. Which meant either nothing had happened there or nothing had happened there that got written down in a searchable form. I noted the absence of information and moved on. The lost and found log was a standard 3-ring binder. When I cleaned the room on Wednesdays, it was sitting on the folding table, and I'd see it, and I'd told myself not to go through it, so I didn't. For the first month, I didn't. But in the 4th week, I had to, or rather, I thought I had to. Someone had turned in a set of keys to the front desk, and the front desk had asked me to log them in the book because it was after hours and they were heading out, and the procedure was to log anything turned in before close so the morning staff knew it was there. It was a reasonable, ordinary request. Patricia, the front desk woman, handed me the keys in a Ziploc bag with a little paper tag that had the date and the description of where they'd been found. The weight room near the bench press station. So I opened the binder. It was organized by date, most recent entries at the back. Items were listed by description, date found, location found, and a column for date claimed, which was often empty. There were items in that log going back years. The binder was thick. I turned to the current section and logged the keys. Date, description, location. I wrote it neatly, the way Gerald had showed me to fill out forms. And then, because I am a person who notices details and has a hard time just leaving them alone, my eye went to the entries around mine. The one immediately above mine was dated 2 days previous. A gray wool scarf left in the community room. Reasonable. The one below the space I'd just written in was from 4 days prior. A child's backpack. Found gymnasium entrance. I dated mine. Capped the pen, closed the binder. And then I stood there for a second because something had snagged in my brain like a shirt on a nail. I opened the binder again. To the entry for the child's backpack. Date found. November 14th. I looked at the date on my watch. It was November 12th. I looked back at the entry. November 14th. I looked at my watch again. November 12th, 11:47 p.m. I looked at the entry a third time in case I'd misread it. I hadn't. I stood there in the lost and found room, under the single fluorescent light, with the binder open in my hands. I checked the entry above that one. November 9th. The entry below it. November 7th, the dates were in order. Descending as you went backward. They were all reasonable, coherent entries, except for the one dated November 14th, which was 2 days in the future. I stared at the entry. Child's backpack. Blue, dinosaur pattern. Found gymnasium entrance. Blue with a dinosaur pattern. I thought about the lunchbox I'd seen on the shelf when I cleaned in here last Wednesday. Blue dinosaur. A kid's lunchbox, not a backpack. Different item, similar description. I told myself it was a coincidence, a common enough pattern for kids' things, and I almost convinced myself. I closed the binder. I set it on the table where I'd found it. I took the Ziploc bag with the keys and set it on the shelf in the area designated for recently turned in items, and I left the room and pulled the door shut and stood in the west hallway for a moment. The fluorescent light above me browned out for a second and then recovered. I finished my shift. I went home. I did not sleep well. The backpack appeared in the Lost and Found on November 14th. I know because I made a point of checking. I told myself I was just verifying, just confirming, just being rational. I had no reason to go into the room except the pretense of checking whether the cleaning supplies needed restocking, which they didn't, but it gave me a reason to open the door. The backpack was there, on the second shelf near the left end. Blue cartoon dinosaur pattern on the main compartment. The design printed directly on the nylon. Child-sized. Maybe for a kid between 6 and 10, I'd guess. The kind of backpack that comes in a 2-pack from Target or Walmart. I stood in the doorway and looked at it. The date in the log had said gymnasium entrance. Someone had moved it in here after finding it. It was just a lost backpack. Kids lost backpacks constantly. I went back to my cart and continued my rounds. But I kept thinking about the date in the log. November 14th, written on November 12th. It was possible someone had simply made a clerical error. Written the wrong date. Written a future date by accident because they were tired or distracted or thinking about the wrong month. That was possible. It was the most likely explanation. I held on to it. I found the courage to ask Gerald about the log in a careful, sideways way. I said I'd noticed some of the dates seemed inconsistent. Possible clerical errors. Should I flag those? He was mopping the pool deck. He kept his rhythm, pull and push, pull and push. Don't correct the dates, he said, even if they look wrong. Especially then. I thought about how to ask the next question. Have you worked here long? I said instead. 11 years, he said. Do you like it? He gave me a look. Not hostile, evaluating. It's a job, he said. Sure. He mopped for a moment. The dates in the log are accurate, he said without looking at me, just not always in the direction you'd expect. I didn't say anything. He didn't say anything else. There were other small things in those early weeks. I'm aware that I'm cataloging them in a way that might make them seem connected or significant, and I want to be careful about that. And tired people connect things. But here's what I noticed. The umbrella that had been on the top shelf of the lost and found for as long as I'd been working there, a full-size black umbrella, slightly bent along one spoke, was gone one Wednesday. Not gone as in claimed. Gone as in simply not there, with no log entry marking it as claimed. It had just disappeared back into the world, or forward into it, and nobody seemed to have noted it. The library book was still there. It would stay there until almost the end. There was a phone charger on the bottom shelf that I'd noticed because it was a specific older model, one of the really early iPhones, the lightning connector, but the original short kind. And one night I passed the room before closing when it was still technically daytime operations, still had members in the building, and the door was open, and I heard, briefly, a sound from inside that I will describe as best I can. It was a notification sound, a phone receiving a text, that specific 2-note chime, very quiet, from inside the room. I stepped into the doorway. The room was as it always was. The shelf with the folded items. The phone charger on the bottom shelf. I looked at the phone charger. It wasn't plugged into anything. There was no phone. A notification chime from an unconnected charger. I stood there for a count of maybe 5 seconds. Then, someone from the front desk area called my name about a spill in the hallway near the gym, and I went. I've gone over that one many times. Sound carries in old buildings in unpredictable ways. Someone down the hall could have received a text. The sound could have bounced around, arrived in a way that seemed to come from the wrong direction. This is physically possible, I know it is. But I also know what it sounded like, standing in that doorway. Around week 6, I met the other overnight staff more formally. There were only a few of us, me and Gerald for janitorial. A security guard named Rico, who did 2 overnight shifts a week and was a genuinely pleasant guy, former military, very contained. He'd make a loop every 2 hours and we'd nod at each other in the hallway, sometimes exchange a few words. He was careful. I liked him. There was also a woman named Sandra, who came in at 5 a.m. to open the building and prep the front desk and the concessions before the morning staff arrived. I'd see her in that last hour of my shift, sometimes, in the early winter dark, when she was arriving just as I was finishing the last parts of my routine. She was in her mid-40s, heavy-set, comfortable in herself in a way that I admired. She always had coffee. She never offered me any, and I never asked, but I didn't take it personally. And there was a man named Phil who worked a partial overnight shift twice a week, usually Tuesday and Thursday. He was the one who dealt with the maintenance and mechanical aspects of the building, the boiler, the pool chemistry, the HVAC filters, things I didn't touch. Phil was early 50s, lean, quiet. He had a habit of not quite answering the question you asked, not in an evasive way exactly, more in the way of someone who's learned that most questions don't really need answering, or that the answer he has isn't one the other person wants. Phil was the first one who made me feel like someone was pretending. I mean that specifically. There's a difference between a private person and a person who is performing privacy, who has learned to make themselves seem unremarkable in the way that people do when they've decided something should not be remarked upon. The first time I felt it clearly was in the 6th week. I was finishing up the west hallway, coming from the direction of the lost and found, and Phil was coming from the maintenance corridor that ran behind the west wall. We were going to pass each other in the natural course of things. And as I came around the corner, I heard a sound from the lost and found room that I will try to describe accurately. It was a low sound, almost subvocal, the way